Hello, everybody, and welcome to this workshop. We're going to be talking about dealing with isolation. My name is Micah. I'm a certified Canadian counselor, and I'm bringing you this workshop on behalf of TIE's Healthy Minds. So this workshop was originally created to kind of help us manage a little bit of the isolation kinds of things that have come up with the pandemic. And I think we're still in the pandemic, so this is still helpful. And as a counselor, I've also spoken with a number of immigrants, and I believe that isolation is a topic that is relevant for newcomers to Canada as well, for a variety of reasons. And so I hope if you're just watching this down the line as a newcomer to Canada, or if we're still in this coronavirus craziness, that you will find something in this workshop that will be helpful for you. So let's get on with it here. Okay, first of all, we'll go over a little bit of what we're going to be talking about. We're going to kind of explore what isolation means, how we can handle it, and the anxiety that comes with it, tips for feeling better, and where we can get help. So first of all, what is isolation? I think words are slippery things and they can mean different things to different people. So isolation can be an act, a choice, or sometimes something that's required of us by the authority, but the act of isolating. It can also be the state of being isolated, of course. And in regards to quarantine or to the pandemic, quarantine is a type of isolation, which is a complete separation from others of a person suffering from a contagious or infectious disease. So in terms of the virus, that is a major form of isolation that we have experienced over the last year and a half. But of course, isolation is also something that can happen when we move to a new country because we're leaving behind often friends, family, the comfort of a culture that we understand, that feels natural to us. And so coming to a new place also can result in some of these feelings of feeling lonely, stressed, anxious. And these are also things that come up with the isolation from the coronavirus as well, of course. So what does isolation mean to you? It might look different than it does to someone else. That's something that you could consider. How do we handle isolation and anxiety? That's the key. Isolation has been something inevitable in a lot of our lives because of the pandemic or because of moving to a new country. And the key is, how can we handle it? There's a lot of things that are inevitable in our lives that we need to be able to manage. And for this period in history, isolation, I think, is one of those things. So the first tip I would say is to stay connected. So this applies to both coronavirus and being a newcomer to a new country. So socialization is key. Naturally, it's kind of like the antidote for feeling isolated. Feeling connected to others can often ward off loneliness and stress. social media in these days has been a good way to do that because it can bridge a gap of space and time. And of course, sharing your feelings with others helps you feel less alone and more supported. So this applies again, both to being a newcomer and to being isolated because of the pandemic. If you're a newcomer, I would encourage you to maintain the relationships that you had back home through phone calls or Zoom calls or whatever medium you like. Those are still important relationships, even though they're far away. And I understand that that can be a challenge. I have a wonderful friend who's a wonderful person, and when we are together, it's great, and he's present 100%, and we get along very well. But we live in different countries, so when we're, not together, I never hear from him. So I understand. It's not easy. Some people are just not great at keeping in touch with people that they aren't around, and I understand that. But I would encourage you to try your best to keep in touch with people from your home culture or your home country. And this applies, of course, to the pandemic in the sense that it seems like it comes and goes, our ability to meet with people in person. But in those times that we're not allowed to now and in the future, I encourage you to connect as much as you can using technology or social distancing, eating outside, whatever it is that you can to connect with people. I'm going to add to this slide to also get connected. As a newcomer, it can be very challenging to kind of make those connections. And one way I like to think about getting connected is to consider 3 different things. 1 is interests, 2 is values, and 3 is beliefs. So when looking for groups of people to connect with, and this is just a little rule of thumb, it's not necessary. If you have other ways of connecting with people, wonderful, step into those. But if you're kind of wondering how you can connect with people, consider interests, values, and beliefs. So interests, do you like sports? Do you like, I don't know, baking? What hobbies do you have? There's lots of different groups related to interests that you could consider. Also, cultural groups, groups that share common values. It doesn't have to be a cultural group, but there's a chance that if you're here, there's other people from your home culture that are also in the community, and it may be a good idea to connect with them as a starting point for kind of getting into Canadian culture. And beliefs, if you have some kind of spirituality, maybe there's a religious group or faith group that you could meet with, that would be a good way to connect with people. So those are just 3 examples of ways to get connected. And I know it's easier said than done, especially if you're introverted or if you have some challenges with language or stuff like that. It can be a challenge, I understand. But the sooner that we can connect, the sooner we can kind of begin to manage some of that stress, which of course we can manage on our own as well. If you can't get connected, there are still ways to manage it, but being a part of a community is, I think, very important for our well-being. So that being said, let us continue. Yes, be active. This is very important. fresh air and exercise help with loneliness and stress. And here we suggest going for a walk if you're able to, spending time in nature and getting exercise releases feel-good chemicals in your brain that boost your mood. So there are a number of really beautiful places in Calgary, if that's where you are joining us from, where you can go for a walk. You don't have to leave the city. You can get a little taste of nature. If you don't have a vehicle, you can still get there with public transit, that kind of thing. If you do have a vehicle, Alberta is a great place to explore nature. The mountains can be a really beautiful place to do that. So yes, exercise and being out in nature are wonderful ways to boost your mood. I understand, of course, that we live in Canada and we have limited good weather for doing that kind of thing. I would challenge you to even try in the winter on the nicer days to get outside or find a way to exercise. Maybe join a whatchamacallum, a leisure center or something near you if you're able to. If you wear, here's a pro tip for newcomers to Canada. If you wear enough layers, you can be outside in just about the coldest weather that Canada can throw at you. Layers are important. So there's a tip for you. Moving on, change your mindset. Mindset is very important, of course. Avoid thinking too much. This just means if we focus a lot on worst case scenarios, it can have the potential of triggering feelings of anxiety and stress and things of that nature. So essentially trying to control our thinking and putting a positive spin on things can be helpful in avoiding some of that anxiety coming up. Be mindful. Mindfulness is essentially the same as awareness, being aware of what's going on in our lives with our emotions, our bodies. Watching guided meditation or yoga, doing yoga. If you have faith in your life, things like prayer or whatever kind of rituals might go along with your particular faith are ways of kind of being aware and being mindful. And these things are really important for helping us calm down some of those anxious thoughts. And gratitude is something that studies have shown can improve mood if we are able to think of something that we're grateful for every day. So that's just an easy challenge for you when you wake up in the morning or you're going to bed at night. Think of something that you're grateful for, even in times where it feels like maybe there's nothing. I would encourage you to try and find something like that. Try a new perspective. We have a little picture. Sometimes you need to look at things from a different perspective. There's a little baby looking at the world upside down. Embrace alternatives. So this point is quite specific for the middle of the pandemic, which was when this workshop was first created. You can still do some of the things you love just virtually. There was that big push in the beginning for kind of the whole world to go virtual as everyone stayed home. So I think a lot of those virtual things have stuck with us, and there's ways to do virtual things still. But this can apply to a lot of things in our lives, looking at things from a new perspective, especially coming from a new culture if there's part of that culture or something that you loved in that culture that you're not able to do here, really give it some thoughts, try and consider maybe what alternatives exist, what it was about that thing that you love to do that you can't do anymore, and take that and try and find something probably not exactly the same, but maybe something that meets those similar needs. For example, I lived in Mexico City for a long time, and I love a good taco. Oh man, I'm just drooling a little bit thinking about it. You can't beat, there's good food all over the world, but for me, growing up there, you just can't beat some good Mexican food. But more so than the food, what I liked about that part of the culture is that eating together with people, with my friends, going to the little taco stand, or coming outside when the traveling lady was selling her tamales or whatever. And so I can take that and say, well, besides the food, I liked the community aspect of it. So how can I do that here in Canada? I can't find the same delicious taco, unfortunately, but I can meet with friends, which is kind of the most important part of that experience for me. So maybe I could still go to a restaurant with friends or find something else to do with them. So that's just a very simple example, but there are ways that we can find what we value and try and take advantage of our new surroundings as we engage with a new, different culture. And just like we've had to all adapt to a more virtual kind of living because of the pandemic. And get busy. So get a new hobby. This applied a lot to the beginning of the pandemic, because although suddenly we were having to stay home and we had more time on our hands than we usually did. I know a lot of people have what we call COVID hobbies. So I don't know what that might have been for you if you got one. Mine was baking sourdough bread, believe it or not. And for several months, I loved it, but now it takes way too much time. I have to be home for 5 hours. I have to like stretch the dough every 45 minutes. So I don't do it anymore, but when I had time, I did it. So how can this apply to us today as either newcomers to a new culture or people that are still living in the pandemic times? If you're working from home and you have more time than you did, this still applies. It's a great idea to having something to kind of put your attention towards, like a hobby, can be great for dealing with some of that stress and anxiety. It can help release some of that. And if you're in a new culture, it can be kind of tricky because sometimes we don't have the language or the knowledge to take up a hobby, or we feel like too much else is going on, and that's understandable as well. But if you find that as you're adjusting, you have time to kind of put towards something, it might be a good idea to take up something or focus on a hobby maybe that you've already had. I know language learning can be a hobby, but also if you're a newcomer, working on your language can also be a very effective way of kind of getting to be more comfortable in the culture. And if you're interested in more kind of cultural adjustment type things, we're also going to be putting together a cross-cultural adjustment workshop for you that will have more specific things in that regard. Do something that gives you a sense of purpose or accomplishment, and do things that make you feel good. So what is it that you value, and how can we take that and turn it into maybe an activity or something that's going to help you give you a greater sense of purpose, which can help offset some of those feelings of isolation, especially if it's something that you do in community, but of course you don't have to. Help others. This is a great one. Helping others benefits everyone. By giving support, you get a sense of control and purpose. It can be as simple as a phone call or text saying, how are you doing? Thinking of you. This applies, I think, at all times for all people, not just during a pandemic, but helping others is really, without expecting something in return, really is great for your mental health and your overall well-being. Maintain a routine. This one, I know I sound like a broken record. I keep saying this one's important, but they're all good. They're all important. Maintaining a routine is really great for just your overall well-being. Good self-care can offset a great deal of anxiety and stress. So that just means your basics: eating well, going for walks if you can, or other kinds of physical activities, getting 6 to 8 hours of sleep if you can, deep breathing, stretching, meditation, anything like that. And a routine can really help you stay away from sinking into some of those negative patterns that make it hard to, let's say, stay away from that negative mood. Sometimes a routine is enough to help us maintain that positive mindset in times of isolation. As a newcomer to Canada, there may be ways in which you will have to adjust your routine if there are elements of our culture that or elements of your culture, I'm sorry, that we don't have here. So finding that new routine is also a step that you can take. A good routine can help you stop. No, sorry, excuse me. A good routine can stop you from feeling a little lost. Okay, we got it. Things to avoid, of course, using alcohol or smoking to cope with stress, which are common things to turn to, but in the end, they're often going to create more troubles than they will solve. Avoid using devices too much. So earlier I mentioned using devices or technology to connect with others, and I still think that that's a positive thing. However, if we get really caught up in it, it can turn into something negative. Social media can give you that chemical boost in your brain that makes you feel good. But if we get too caught up in it, it can be something that we kind of begin to depend on for those good feelings. So we don't really want to get to that point. So that's kind of a thing that we need to moderate. So in a certain amount, it's good, but too much can lead to challenges. Avoid watching too much news. So this just means that, if we have the news channel on 24 hours a day, the news gets money from, they want people to watch what they're producing, right? Of course. And so sometimes they will focus on the more shocking things that are happening in the world. And so having the news on for 24 hours a day with stuff that's often that kind of negative thing can definitely cause our anxiety to spike. So as an alternative, I would recommend finding one or two news sources that are reliable and kind of sticking with those and trying to only read what's relevant to you or what kind of interests you, and not get caught up in kind of this 24-hour taking in of news, which can kind of affect our mental health in a lot of ways. Be open to getting help. So if you're having anxiety, talk to a professional counselor. They may offer phone or online sessions. Most do. There's only a few right now, as of this recording in October 2021, that are offering in-person sessions that I know of in Calgary, but lots are doing online, so that's an option. And there's also affordable options no matter what your budget is. Even if you have no money, there's options out there for you to find a counselor. If you're in Alberta, I would suggest calling 211. We'll talk more about this later, but 211, you can just call that number, and that's a resource line, and say, hey, I want a counselor, but I can't afford it. And they will help you find someone, basically. They also offer services in other languages. If you're still not super comfortable with English, you can call 211 and request a translator. If you had anxiety before the coronavirus outbreak and your feelings of fear and panic are getting worse, it's important to reach out to your doctor or therapist. Also, it can be hard to navigate a new culture. If you're a newcomer, you're having some of these hard emotions that you're going through, it can be helpful to find someone, a professional to talk to, of course. So here are some resources. Alberta Health Services, so 811, you will talk to a nurse, I believe, if you're having questions about health issues, especially COVID symptoms, anything like that. So they'll help you with that. 911, of course, if you're experiencing an emergency, that's the number to call here. A distress center is a 24-hour crisis line. I volunteer there. They're basically there for kind of emotional support. If you feel like you're having a crisis, that's a number you can call at any time. I believe you can also ask for a translator for this line, and they will find someone who can translate the call for you. And talk to your family doctor, of course. We have free healthcare here, yay. And so make use of it. And unfortunately, with this framework, we don't have the ability to ask questions, but definitely if it's giving you something to think about, discuss it with someone else, share the video with someone, discuss kind of what you're thinking. Here's some of the resources that were used to create the slides. So that is all. Thank you for joining us, and I hope that you have found some value in this. And we have other workshops, I believe, that will be made on video format, so feel free to check those out. And I just want to encourage you, there's lots of supports and resources for you, no matter what stage of life you're in or what you're going through. If you're having challenges because of the pandemic or because of being a newcomer or anything else that's going on, I encourage you to reach out to someone and get connected, because TIES is a great resource. They have lots of different things that they do, and we're here to help you live a full and healthy life. So yes, I hope that you have a wonderful fall or whatever time of year you're watching this, and come back and join us again next time.